It's foolish because the idea that people come here because our benefit system is attractive is absurd. I mean, do we really think that people in the middle of a war zone get onto the internet and check out to find out who has the best benefit system? It's barking mad.
This national conference comes at a time when MP Sherrie Eugene publishes her all-parliamentary report, which is telling. It means that all parties are now listening, so technically we should see some change. We'll just have to wait and see whether that change is truly effective.
I haven't got any answer from the Home Office. The only answer I've got to them is just a refusal.
Because when the Home Office says no to you, you have no alternative. So I have been destitute for 1 year and some years, and I've been struggling.
And being faced with imminent danger and death threats from your own country. And you have then to give details of your painful personal story over and over and over again.
Nelson Mandela says it's a long walk to freedom. Sometimes I might think, is it a long way to walk to freedom for me?
Being destitute is something that shames somebody.
It's at events like this that you realise humanity is practically playing its part. These are human stories. Sherrie Eugene picked up on human emotion.
Listening to what Janet was saying today, she was talking about shame, she was talking about what happened to her, and it reminds me that actually this can happen to anybody. And there is a kind of tendency to assume that if you become homeless, you're somehow very different, or that if you are forced to flee your home, that you are a very different type of person. But in fact, war and tragedy and difficulty can happen in areas like Bristol. It can happen in areas that look quite a lot like Clifton in other countries, with different cultural references. But places that are really quite wealthy can be affected by war and tragedy. People of all backgrounds, of all ages, from the poor to the very rich, from the uneducated to the highly educated, men and women, all can be affected, and all maybe at some point be forced to flee their homes. And that, I think it's really important that we remember that. It's a dangerous thought, actually, because if you have that in mind, you're forced to make a connection with the person who's standing in front of you. And that's very dangerous, because at that point you're forced to do something.
And then Sarah spoke about the recommendations that were made, based on listening to people who really know.
Playing with the pastoral care system and immigration system is not enough. Far too many people go into detention for far too long. We need a cap on the amount of time that people should go into detention. Most of these people should not be in detention in the first place. It came out with really strong statements saying it's expensive, ineffective and unjust. And I think the thing I want to say to all the speakers today, because all of you mentioned shame in one way or another, it's not your shame, actually. It's everybody's shame that you were put through this. Everybody's shame. Don't take that burden of shame upon yourself, because it's us who should be carrying it. It's us who should be carrying it. We should not be forcing anybody into this position. And all I saw in the speakers today was your extraordinary strength and dignity and humour and hope and life and vitality. It was me who carried the shame when I listened. So thank you. Thank you. That even if you are accepted as having a claim for refugee status, you can often still find yourself made destitute because the system doesn't work properly, and that we're too indifferent to the plight of people who come here seeking our protection to manage to link together the benefits system. So the moving on period just doesn't work even for people who are accepted.
Ford Mazzacquazzo is coordinator of Bristol City of Sanctuary and helped organise this event. He's been on the front line of people's pain and welcomes the report.
But what is significant is, yes, it is what are you going to do after the report? I think that is something that is so critical. I think the detention is, the longevity. People have been detained for a very long time. You are not sure when are you going to be out, and they're treated like they're more as criminals, really. So I think the fact that they're being detained, there's an element of that you are at fault. Yet they are not criminals. It's tantamount to a prison, and which has a negative impact in terms of the health and well-being of people, because they are not sure, what have they done, except for the mere fact that is because of their, immigration status.
I contacted the Home Office regarding detention and how the recommendations would play out. They told me that at present they're not able to respond. The government's past comments about refugee life ring even more true now, echoing strongly in light of the recent disasters in the Mediterranean.
It lacks any kind of moral compass. The statements that we saw, particularly I felt around our non-involvement in the issue of ships picking up migrants from the Mediterranean. I mean, it was staggering to me, not simply that we pulled the funding, but the arguments that we used to describe that, the arguments that said it was better for a few to drown to try and prevent others from coming, that was made quite upfront.
The headlines in certain newspapers shape some people's thinking, but there are a host of local and national campaigning organisations like Refugee Action, the Red Cross, City of Sanctuary and Bristol Refugee Rights that it's felt are starting to tip the balance. The most recent organisation, Borderlands. On any given Tuesday, lunch is served to over 100 people. But it's not just about a great lunch. It's more about a common understanding of a shared experience. Despite funding cuts, organisations are battling through and gaining momentum, sharing resources and signposting the most vulnerable. John Patrick supports the trustees of Borderlands based at St Nicholas Church. Hassan is a volunteer too. Caroline Price has been a volunteer since Borderlands was established 4 years ago.
People who come here have come through terrible, tragic situations, sometimes of terror, fleeing for their lives, leaving behind them their loved ones, their home, their country, so much. And they've suffered a great deal. They don't always feel very welcome, sadly, in our culture. So when they walk through these doors, we want to give them a very warm welcome, for them to know that they are truly welcome. This is their home, we are their family. Sometimes people say that, this is my family here.
But because we haven't been through that, how can we empathise?
That's a very important point. I think that as human beings, we may not have been through such drastic situations as people have been, but perhaps we all know some little tiny part of what separation means, loss means, grief means. And so we come as we are and we bring our own life experiences. As we listen to other people, we try to understand, and perhaps it touches on our own experiences in a very tiny way. If we've experienced loss or grief or separation or being far from home, not anything like what most people who come here have, but in a small, tiny way. I think that helps us to be more understanding.
Apart from lunch and companionship, there's a chance to learn English too, empowering people to tell their story, often ignored and excluded when communication is not effective. Margaret Ulloa is an English teacher.
Well, Borderlands, as far as I can make out, has grown out of the parish community at St Nick's, but it's its own thing now. It has its own life, its own impetus, but it is very strongly based in the Christian principles that brought it into being in the first place. The thing is that the whole purpose of our being here is to share what we have and to share what we've got. So at Borderlands, those of us who volunteer have the privilege of sharing with people who have sacrificed an incredible amount to come here. As far as I am concerned, it is a privilege to teach the users here and to eat with them and to work with them.
There are so many people who voluntarily give their time, their skills, their thoughts, their efforts to help people who are so excluded within society. We have lots of volunteers who support our charity, but there are other asylum seeker and refugee agencies and charities throughout Britain, and they've all got people who support them. We're giving their money, giving their time, giving their commitment, going out and fundraising for them, doing fun runs, doing all sorts of things. It's astonishing to see. I think the British public are amazing, really, really brilliant, and I have huge faith in that.
If you were in Afghanistan, for example, and you were being tortured,
Yep.
would you want to leave?
Yes, every day. And I would hope to end up somewhere like this and hope that the system's protected me, because that's what it's there for and that's what a civilised society should be there to do.
Sometimes hard work, sometimes difficult, but it's been a huge joy for me, and I've made a lot of great friends here.
So, as far as you're concerned, why were you there?
I think the only crime I committed was to try and seek safe sanctuary. And when you feel that you are in danger from your own government and the powers that be, and the politicians, the powerful politicians who have got all the power, all the money, and you're just a normal human being trying to lead a normal life.
This is not about sponging off our benefits. This is about finding a place of safety where they can rebuild their lives, when they can be creative, contributing human beings. And what do? We put them into prisons.
I think if you actually talk to people who've had experiences with asylum seekers, they're not going to be so negative as if you listen to the mainstream media.
Well, I hope you managed to see the bigger picture, human stories. And with a subject like this, there's so much more to unravel. And I'm sure you'll form your own opinions. But better to do that with the truth.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Borderlands. Thank you very much.